Welcome to a new episode of 49ers Talk on NBCSportsBayArea.com. Introducing your hosts, 49ers insider Matt Maiocco and 49ers host Laura Britt.
This is 49ers Talk brought to you by Big O Tires. I'm Matt Maiocco. That's not Laura Britt. That's Jennifer Leach, and filling in for Laura Britt, who may or may not be on assignment.
She's always on assignment.
We're always on assignment.
We are.
We work a lot because we care.
That's exactly it.
Yes. And you know what? The 49ers' final exhibition game on Sunday was something to care about because it was so unlike any other preseason game I've seen, because it was actually kind of like, what's going on out there? It was like, even though the Raiders decided they weren't going to play anybody, so the outcome made no difference at all. And the fact that the 49ers were able to just go up and down the field at will against, basically a bunch of Raiders who will soon be former Raiders, it was still interesting to see what Kyle Shanahan wanted to accomplish with the first two series of the game.
It was interesting. We saw a lot of things that we had kind of seen in practice, but they put it to test full speed, and it was interesting. Garoppolo was in for a few snaps. Trey Lance was in for a couple more. They even rotated in and out one snap at a time. So it seemed to go really smoothly. Everybody seemed to be happy with it after the game, and Trey Lance was having fun, is what he said.
Well, and Jimmy Garoppolo at least said he was having fun. If you're Jimmy Garoppolo and you're a guy who took every snap, I think, during the 2019 season, and you were the quarterback of the Super Bowl team, and the 49ers right now at least believe, fan base believes, I think front office believes, I think the players believe that they're capable of going back there. For Jimmy to at least stand up there in front of the media and say that it was a lot of fun and he's willing to do whatever it takes says a lot about him. I just don't know that, what we saw on Sunday is going to be something that's sustainable, but at least gives Kyle Shanahan some options for the right matchups, the right situations of getting those guys in and out, and kind of the mechanics of deciding to go with one quarterback over the other, getting the personnel correct, getting the play call correct, and then getting up to the line of scrimmage and making sure that you run a play without a delay game penalty.
I thought it was really interesting how smoothly it went for how different the situations were. Sometimes it would be Garoppolo on the goal line, sometimes it was Trey Lance near the goal line. I thought it was interesting that it wasn't a set situation each time, although he said it's going to be situational, but it seemed more random, and it seemed like it worked.
I think that was the whole idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
To keep it, to make it random on Sunday so that when the games count, it's kind of open-ended and they can kind of adjust on the fly, because, as Kyle Shanahan said after the game, that you can go into a game with a game plan and kind of figure out, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it. But in the course of the game, things may change. He said numerous times since he took over as the head coach in 2017, they basically go into every game thinking we're going to run the ball 50% of the time, we're going to throw the ball 50% of the time. And of course, seldom does it ever occur like that. It's just a matter of the flow of the game. And so I think what he was trying to do on Sunday wasn't necessarily to send a message to the Lions, although I do think they did that, but it's just like, hey, let's be in a real life situation in front of a crowd with a little bit of adrenaline going, more so than a regular practice, and now let's work on the mechanics of doing that switch.
I think logistics on that are a huge thing, getting guys in and out the right time, the right place. The fact that all three quarterbacks, Lance, Jimmy, Sudfeld, are all hearing the personnel in their helmets at the same time, then they get the play call. There's a lot that goes into it. Shanahan has to prepare ahead of time for the call to go into the helmets, and then they get cut off at a certain point. So there's a lot of responsibility on the quarterbacks to be able to do it correctly when they're supposed to be out there.
Yeah, so after the game, Shanahan said that he definitely liked the results, because when they did this quarterback rotation, the 49ers scored 2 touchdowns. One was on a Jimmy Garoppolo run of 1 yard, which, ill-advised.
That's that linebacker mentality that he has.
Not
It didn't look good.
advisable to lower your head and dive into a linebacker and a 320-pound defensive tackle.
There's a little gasp in the press box at that moment.
Yeah, it was like, okay, well, good thing they drafted a quarterback, because we're going to see him here for a long time. But anyway, and then the next series, Trey Lance was the guy who scored the rushing touchdown.
And his run was much easier.
Well,
running in.
He looks easier running.
Well, but he also didn't have to run into somebody going into the end zone as well.
But it's also a designed run.
Right.
Whereas Garoppolo's was a scramble, bootleg, and he thought the opening was there, and the opening was there, but the opening kind of closed up. And, after the game, I asked Kyle Shanahan about, putting this on film, and do you want the Lions to know that this is an option, something that they should prepare for? And he said, well, it is an option. It's always going to be an option because of the quarterbacks they have. And so I really do think it's going to be a game plan to game plan thing. But I know Kyle Shanahan loves to get into the minds of defensive coordinators. And he knows that there's only so many hours in the day that a defensive coordinator or any coach can prepare for an upcoming opponent. Now, the Lions do have 2 weeks to prepare for the 49ers, but he also knows that if the Lions are preparing for a bunch of stuff, invariably they're preparing for a bunch of stuff that they won't use because the 49ers aren't going to use it. So the fact that he showed this stuff makes me believe that they're not going to do anything quite like what they did Sunday against the Raiders. They're going to have a more structured, more specific game of plan of attack for how they use Trey Lance.
Absolutely. I think Kyle Shanahan is so smart in that way. I mean, he's not known as an offensive guru for nothing. He is not going to show his hands. He's not going to show his cards in regards to anything. He's not going to name the starting quarterback. He's going to keep everything under the table. And what he's shown in the preseason is a much dumbed down version of what he can do offensively on the field.
But don't you think he's announced the starting quarterback without announcing the starting quarterback?
Well, he hasn't changed anything since back in OTAs when he kept saying Jimmy Garoppolo is our starting quarterback. And it seems like the media has, we're included, has gone with this narrative that it could be Trey Lance, it could be Jimmy Garoppolo who's going to be the starting quarterback. Obviously, they're both going to see time on the field, but I think it's Jimmy Garoppolo's job, and I've always thought it has been.
Yeah,
his
I don't think people who cover the team think that Trey Lance is going to be the starter.
No.
I think people who are on the outside, who just look at things
and they see a number
globally,
3 pick, and it's splashy and it's interesting, and he's had those moments, and the moments that get highlighted on TV are those moments like the 80-yard touchdown to Trent Sherfield and those big passes that happen in practice, and they don't see all the little things that happen in games where...
I'd say from that standpoint, I mean, we do that too.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, all the plays in the preseason and all the plays in the practices, the splash plays have been Trey Lance throwing deep passes, something that Garoppolo really doesn't do. But as Kyle Shanahan said, I think we have a pretty good idea who the starting quarterback's going to be. And I think he even said, and the players have a pretty good idea. And I do know that I was in New Hampshire, by the way, dropping my child off, my eldest off at college, but I saw the clip of Jimmy Garoppolo saying he has a pretty good idea, and he was smiling from ear to ear. So it was
pretty clear.
Either he really doesn't want to play football this season, or
he's the starting quarterback.
Or he's the starting quarterback. And so I think it's as simple as that. But there's a lot going on with this roster, because I think this roster, it looks pretty good. Generally, at this point, you can identify 2 or 3 kind of guys on the bubble, or 2 or 3 situations where it's either or. I think with the initial cuts to 53 coming up on Tuesday at 1 p.m., I think there's a lot more moving parts with this team than just about any other team I've covered, because there are probably more NFL players on this team. I mean, I've covered teams in the past where you're trying to come up with 53 players to make the team, and you're at 50 going,
who else do you
yeah,
keep?
there are three guys who probably shouldn't be in the NFL who are going to be on the team.
You look at John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan's first season here. I think it's kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
They were building it from scratch, and they didn't have a lot of players that should. I mean, you look at that team and the guys that are on the roster there. How many of them wouldn't make the team now? There's quite a few.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Quite a few.
Yeah. And so, what's the one position that kind of fascinates you the most?
I think running backs. There are 5 really good backs. They've got to.
We're talking halfbacks.
Yes.
We know Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, he'll be on the team.
Correct.
And so you keep 4 halfbacks.
Yes.
And so right now, the 5 are Raheem Mostert, locked to make the team.
Absolutely.
Trey Sermon, locked to make the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 out of these 3, JaMycal Hasty, Elijah Mitchell, Wayne Gallman Jr.
Right.
Right?
That's a tough decision, the 2 out of 3.
Yeah, and Wayne Gallman Jr., who could be on the outside looking in, he was the Giants' leading rusher last season.
Yep.
Elijah Mitchell was a 6th-round draft pick who has a lot of talent. And then JaMycal Hasty is a guy that a year ago this time, the 49ers were saying, hey, JLC, we don't
write about him.
Yeah, don't write about No, he's not available for an interview because we don't want you writing about him, so other teams. Now, last year, they did cut him. He made it through the practice squad, and then they bring him up.
Because none of us wrote about him.
Well, let's not get too carried away.
But he had a good training camp. He showed his speed, and you obviously saw a lot more of that in the preseason. He has played really well in all 3 games.
Yeah.
Show that he's aggressive. He runs through the holes, through the gaps very fast, and he's shifty.
Yeah, I think the reason JaMycal Hasty wasn't claimed last year is because there was no preseason.
Right.
And so he was an undrafted rookie a year ago. And if you're not going to draft a guy, then why would you claim him to put on your 53-man when you have no more information than when you started? And so that last year, having no preseason, hurt guys like JaMycal Hasty. So I think Elijah Mitchell definitely makes a team. I could be wrong, but I think he definitely makes a team. He could even suit up on Sundays as maybe a kickoff returner.
He had a really good return in the game versus the Raiders.
And then it's either Hasty or Gallman. Hasty had a really good game, but let's pump the brakes on this. 6 carries, 55 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a 35-yard touchdown run. I mean, it was against guys who aren't going to be aren't going to be in the NFL. So I think what the 49ers look at is, special teams. They look at, the speed. How does he fit in? If there's an injury, who's more apt to step in? And I honestly don't know. I mean, flip a coin. I think I've had Gallman for most of the time as the guy who I think will make the team over Hasty. But I just think it's 50-50.
It is. I know Gallman didn't have a great first preseason game, but Kyle Shanahan said he was much more pleased with him in the second. He probably will be also pleased with him in the third. But after the first game, I wasn't sure that it was going to be him, but he played much more aggressively in the second game. So his arrow is kind of going up, and same with Hasty. He's been playing well, and it's a tough one.
At Big O Tires, you can trust that you're getting a good deal. Now through September 6th, save $100 instantly on select sets of Big O brand tires. Plus, get $50 by mail-in rebate on purchases of $500 or more on your Big O credit card. Big O Tires, the team you trust.
The wide receiver position, I think, is a little bit more defined. Richie James goes on injured reserve with a knee injury that requires surgery. He's going to be out 6 weeks. So he's on injured reserve, which means he's off the table for the 49ers. So his career, in all likelihood, with the 49ers comes to an end. You have Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Trent Sherfield, who are absolute 100% locks. I think Mohamed Sanu will probably make the team. And the reason I put Sherfield even ahead of Sanu is because Sherfield brings special teams value up the wazoo. And so
is that a technical
that
term?
is a technical term. That is a football term, up the wazoo. So those 4 guys I think are pretty set. I also think that Jalen Hurd is going to be on the team as long as he made it through the game on Sunday healthy. You know, anytime, like Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch said, he is one of our top 6 receivers. They're going to keep 6 receivers. He's one of the top 6. It's just a matter with him, the health. And so he had the back issue as a rookie. He had the knee injury last year. If he made it through this game healthy, which all signs point to him making it through healthy, but a lot of these things you don't know until the next day or the day after. So I would think he makes it. Travis Benjamin had a concussion, which kind of puts him a little bit on that tenuous stage of let's see how that plays out. I think Juwan Jennings is on the outside looking in because of Jalen Hurd. And so I think Simba Webster, it'll be between Simba Webster and Travis Benjamin, because that last spot has to be the guy who's going to be the punt returner. So who's looking better on the punt returns? Who do they have confidence in to fill that role? I think right now I'm leaning towards Simba Webster. You?
For me, it's like what you were saying with the running back side. It's like it's 50-50 for me. It's hard to say with those guys. I thought that Kyle Shanahan was really impressed with Juwan Jennings and how he played coming back from injury. That's a guy who, you know, didn't have the benefit of OTAs, rookie minicamp, training camp last year, and you know they like what he's been able to do. But he's kind of similar to, you know, he plays really hard. If they keep Jalen Hurd, maybe that's the guy that they don't keep because he's kind of a similar.
Very similar. And also, my thinking would be if the 49ers waive Juwan Jennings, is anybody going to claim him and keep him on their 53-man roster? I don't think so.
No.
So I think for Juwan Jennings, more than likely he gets bad news, but then he's back on the practice squad. And so those are some of the guys on offense that I think are interesting. And I know that you're fascinated by one particular position group on defense.
I think the defensive line is one of those positions that's so deep. You know, after they played their game on Sunday, obviously they weren't playing against starters, but from top to bottom, you've got guys who have made plays, they've made an impact, and there's so much talent there. I think that's where you find players that are going to end up on other teams that are going to get claimed. There's been injuries across the league. I think it's just so deep with the 49ers. They've got a lot of talent there. You've got the guys that are definitely going to make it for sure, the locks, and we can talk about that. I mean, obviously, Nick Bosa, Dee Ford, Javon Kinlaw, Eric Armstead,
DJ Jones,
Samson Ebukam. Then after that, that's where you kind of like, okay, there's those few positions.
So you just named 6 guys. I actually think the defensive line is one of the easier position groups to forecast because I think they keep them all. I think they keep Zach Kerr. I think they keep Kevin Givens. I think they keep Arden Key. I think they keep Mo Hurst for one day and then put him on IR because he has a high ankle sprain, so they'll get him back later. And then they keep Jordan Willis because he goes on the suspended list and he'll be back 6 weeks into the season. So I think the fact that they haven't done anything with Maurice Hurst yet suggests that they're going to keep him for the initial 53-man cut, and then he goes on IR. So I see the 49ers keeping, what would it be, 9 defensive linemen on the 53-man come Wednesday, but 11 you hold on to by putting Hurst on IR and by Jordan Willis being being on the suspended list. So that's how I see it. But I do know this. Here's a little word from our sponsor, because the 49ers have a tough defense on the field, and Xfinity XFi offers a tough defense against threats. Now that's a win. Xfinity XFi. Can your internet do that? And so I think the 49ers are going, can other defensive lines do what our defensive line can do? Because, John Lynch said that they have gotten phone calls from teams, hey, are you willing to part ways with any of your defensive linemen? And his answer is no. Well, his answer wouldn't be no if they were going to cut some of those guys. So I think a guy like Zach Kerr, a while back, a week ago, I was saying, well, it's either going to be Zach Kerr or Maurice Hurst. Now I think it can be both. I think Arden Key maybe is a little bit on the bubble, but you have, for the edge rushers, Eric Armstead is a defensive end in base downs, but he's not an edge rusher. He moves inside to rush the passer. Your edge rushers are Nick Bosa, Dee Ford, Samson Ebukam, and then Arden Key. So I think they keep 11. And I think what you don't want to do is you don't want to end up keeping guys who are kind of marginal players. And I think they can go light in other areas and then bring guys back, a day later. That might be the case at linebacker, where I think there are some guys who are capable of playing the NFL, behind Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shaair, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. I don't think anybody beyond that is a lock. I don't think Marcel Harris is a lock, or Jonas Griffiths is a lock, or Justin Hilliard, or Elijah Sullivan.
So you keep four there.
So you can bring somebody back. Yeah, keep 4 or 5 there,
right,
and bring somebody back. We talked about Jalen Hurd, and to me, when you look at the 49ers defense, safety Jaquiski Tartt, very much in the same boat as Jalen Hurd. He's one of the top 53. He just has to prove he can stay healthy.
Yeah, and toe injuries are a serious thing. And he spoke about it after the game on Sunday, about how he's still trying to get mobility back, and it's a tough thing. He said this is the most difficult injury he's had to deal with out of all of the ones that he's had, and he's had quite a few. He's made it back, but this is the one that has been the hardest. You can't force flexibility in your toe, and he's tried and tried. He's like, some days it does, some days it doesn't. So it's been a challenge, and that it was the injury that shortened Patrick Willis's career at toe.
A lot of guys' career.
Yeah, a lot.
Can I tell you my own turf toe story?
Do you have turf toe?
I don't, but this is a very silly story. I'm not even sure why I'm telling it on 49ers Talk. But I was coming down the girls were outside playing basketball, and I was coming down the stairs and I tripped outside, and my toe bent backward. And, the kids were laughing I didn't fall, but it bent backward and the girls were laughing at me. And that injury lasted, I felt it for the next year. And it was I dropped one step, and it is painful, and it just limits so many things that you can do. Granted, I'm not a professional athlete. I'm not a strong safety in the NFL. And I'm not sure why I told this story, other than if you have a hyperextended big toe, you can't function at the level that these guys are asked to function at.
And he was talking about how when he blocks, how he holds on to the guy, and then you can't get certain angles with your toes, so then you can't push off. So that affects how he's able to block, and that's an important part of his game when you're out on the field.
Yeah, I know there are orthotics that the guys can use, and it kind of helps to some degree, but that's another. The reason I compared Jaquiski Tartt's situation with Jalen Hurd's situation is because both of those guys played about 25 or 30 snaps in the game Sunday, and yes, they definitely want to see how they're moving. Both those guys should be on the 53-man roster, so a lot of it was how they were moving out there that the coaching staff and the personnel department will be able to look at. But it's also how they feel Monday, how they feel Tuesday, how they recover, and then with a 2-week break, okay, we're good to go, let's roll. And so, Tartt, with the 49ers, they had to feel really good about their safety situation in the offseason because they brought back Jaquiski Tartt. I don't think they were thinking that they could re-sign him, but they did. they also had Tarvarius Moore, who I think that would have been a really good competition. You know, Jimmy Ward is set at free safety.
Yes.
But who's going to be the starting strong safety? Is it going to be Jaquasi Tart or Tarvarius Moore? That was going to be a good competition if they were healthy. Well, Tart only got healthy in the last week, and then Tarvarius Moore is out for an extended period of time, perhaps this season with a torn Achilles. So now, you know, you have two veteran guys who they brought in as insurance, potential starters. That's HaHa Clinton-Dix and Tavon Wilson. HaHa Clinton-Dix had a little bit of good and a little bit of bad in the game Sunday. He gave up a long pass. It looked like cover 2, and that was on his side of the field. He probably should have been there, but then he has an interception, returns it 30 yards. And then Tavon Wilson was the guy that throughout training camp it looked like he was going to be the starter all along. Now, I'm not so sure, not just because Jaquasi Tart is back, but also because Talanoa Hufanga has squarely put himself in that conversation.
He has. He's got a nose for the ball. He has enthusiasm. Kyle Shanahan has spoken
up the wazoo. Does he have enthusiasm
sure,
up the wazoo?
We can go there.
Yeah.
Shanahan loves his energy and how he's improved. And I think that, you know, I spoke to Corey Unlin earlier in the season, earlier in the offseason, and he talked about how both of the defensive backs and Talanoa Hufanga as well started out. There are a lot of learning. There's a big learning curve.
You're talking about the rookies?
Yes, all three of those
Ambry
rookies.
Thomas and
Deommodore Lenoir.
Lenoir.
A big learning curve for all three of those guys, but they've made a lot of steps and they've all improved, and you can see it throughout the 3 games. Just from game 1 to game 3, there's been a lot of improvement. But Talanoa Hufanga also has that special teams contribution that he does, and so that makes a guy more valuable.
Yeah, and that's okay. So the safety is the way I look at it. Jimmy Ward, obviously, he's on the team. Hufanga, definitely on the team. Tart, more than likely, if he holds it physically, on the team. And so that leaves HaHa Clinton-Dix or Tavon Wilson, either or. And I do think, you know, with HaHa Clinton-Dix, you know, he wasn't on a practice squad last year. He was completely out of the game. The guy has 16 interceptions in 7 years, so he can play football. I think that, you know, I don't know that either one of those guys will get picked up by another team. Maybe they do for the 53-man. If they don't, well, we'll put it this way. HaHa Clinton-Dix wasn't in the league, so that means he didn't get picked up by any team last year, so there's no way a team will pick him up this year. So in today's NFL, it's yes, we talk about the 53-man roster, but it's really a 69-man roster. I mean, the 49ers were Exhibit A for that last year.
They went through everybody.
I think there might have only been maybe 2 guys the entire year who were on their practice squad who did not play in a regular season game. So the practice squad is an extension of the 53-man roster, and now you can bring up guys from the practice squad without having to cut anybody. You can bring 2 guys up per week. So, and you're allowed 6 veterans on the practice squad. So if a guy like HaHa Clinton-Dix doesn't make the 53-man, if somebody like Tavon Wilson doesn't make the 53-man, you know, on the offensive line, if Tom Compton doesn't, you can, or Sean Coleman, you could put them on the practice squad, and they are still very much in play to suit up and make an impact on Sundays.
I think that's one of the silver linings of last year, is that they allowed the veterans to be on the practice squad, so it was easy to bring them up if they needed to, and the 49ers definitely needed everybody that was on there.
Yeah, and I think the same thing's going to be, I think last year was kind of the template for how they're going to approach this year in the cuts, is that you know, just to go back to the wide receiver position, I think they could cut just about any of those wide receivers who are, you know, right now on the bubble, and I don't know that any team would pick up any of those guys and put on their 53-man roster, except for like Jalen Hurd. You know, especially though, you know, when John Lynch is talking him up and when Kyle Shanahan is talking him up, if they release or waive Jalen Hurd,
Someone's going to pick him up.
Going to pick him up. So that's why I think that he makes his team after I've gone back and forth with Jalen Hurd. I thought for the longest time, I thought he's going to make it, he's going to make it, he's going to make it. Then after, going after the second preseason game, it's like he's not going to make it. And then John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan basically say he's going to make it. So now I think he's going to make it.
Toyota's national sales event is on now with great deals through Labor Day. Get $750 cash back on 2021 RAV4, Highlander, or Highlander Hybrid. Toyota, let's go places. Cash back is available through TMNA and must be applied to transaction. Excludes RAV4 or Hybrid. Offers end 9/7/21.
I love that you brought up the cornerbacks. That situation is also kind of in flux too, as far as we know who the top two guys are. Jason Verrett is a starter. Emmanuel Mosley is a starter. I'm not sure who their number 3 is. For the longest time, I thought it was Diamador Lenore. But there's also the possibility that the 49ers just have more confidence that Dante Johnson will get in and will just do his job. I mean, he's not a flashy player. He's not somebody that fans appreciate, but I think he's somebody that the coaching staff appreciates, because even last year when they were having issues at nickelback and K'Wan Williams was hurt and they went through nickelback after nickelback and all these guys were getting hurt, they eventually put Dante Johnson in there and he was just fine.
He's been reliable for them. He hasn't been injured, and like John Lynch says, your best ability is your availability, and he has always been there.
Yeah, so that's where we are. It was a very preseason finale type of preseason finale, because it was actually, at least for the first couple series, it was kind of interesting to watch and
kept everybody awake.
It did, and it like made me realize, holy cow, this could be a lot of work for people like you and me, because we're gonna have to be like on it, like who's the quarterback, who's shuffling in and out. But kind of the final stat line, Jimmy Garoppolo completed 62.5% of his passes during the preseason. Trey Lance completed 46.3% of his passes. And I know a lot of people will say, well, Trey Lance had a lot of dropped passes. And in fact, Jalen Hurd had 2 dropped passes. But hey, part of being a quarterback and having a high completion percentage is throwing catchable passes.
And he does rifle it in there a little bit. And he's talked about how he needs to bring it down, he needs to make his balls catchable. And it's something that's going to need to be worked on. It's kind of there needs to be that middle ground. Garoppolo has sometimes he puts a little bit too much air on those deep passes. It's a little bit, seems like it's not hard enough. And then Trey Lance, they need a happy medium. So.
Yeah, well, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have a lot of work ahead of them, because the initial cut to 53, I always say the initial cut, because there's nothing final about the final cuts. That roster is constantly in flux, and whatever they decide, whoever's going to be on the roster on Tuesday, you can guarantee that it's going to be looking a lot different on Wednesday. And one final call out there on Tuesday night at the Concord Pavilion, going to have a great event with the Dwight Clark Legacy Series. George Kittle will be there on stage with Brent Jones. It'll be Dwight Hicks and the Hot Licks, of course, Ronnie Lott, Eric Wright, and Carlton Williamson. George Seifert coached that defensive backfield. Carmen Policy will be there. It's going to be a heck of a fun time.
The stories.
The stories will be
The
fantastic.
last one was amazing.
Yeah, we did one last year with Letters to 87, and it was Brent Jones and Steve Young and Eric Wright and Dwight Hicks were on stage. A lot of fun. This one will be off the charts, and all the proceeds go to the Golden Heart Fund, a great charity. So look forward to seeing you out there at Concord Pavilion. And JLC, I think these 2 weeks here between the final preseason game and the first game, September 12th against the Detroit Lions, I think there's a lot for the 49ers to do, but ultimately I think they're in very good shape as the regular season's right around the corner.
I think so too. I think they've got a lot of decisions to make, but I think that's a good thing for them. I mean, you look just a few years back when they knew who they were going to cut. Now it's much more difficult for them to make those decisions, and that's a good thing. Yeah,
a lot of fun stuff to write about, talk about, and we hope you follow us at NBCSportsBayArea.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. She's Jennifer.